everybody? I'm Brandon Jones, Star Wars fan, Easy Ally, and I'm joined by Mr. Michael Damiani. And we are here to talk about Star Wars Outlaws. First of all, what's up, Damiani?
How's it going? Yeah, you got the two of us here, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
Huber would also be playing this, but he's over in Germany at Gamescom right now, so you'll get to hear Huber's thoughts a little bit later. But yeah, we got Star Wars Outlaws, and we've been playing it a bit, and you're definitely further than I am, so I'm very curious to hear what you think about this, Jones, as we dive into this game.
Well, you haven't seen me pop up on a lot of Easy Allies coverage because I'm playing games, but I'm not really getting code. I'm not really playing stuff in advance. This is one that I messaged Blood with. I was like, just by the way, I noticed this coming up at the end of August. I would be interested. I'm definitely curious to get Huber's takes on this because I'm sure there's a lot of stuff in this game that he will love. But we've gotten a lot of Jedi games. We've gotten a lot of action games, but like Battlefront kind of, there's been a lot of RTSs over the years. Mm-hmm. This is the first Star Wars open world game, and it really focuses on smuggling, on being a scoundrel. It's called Outlaws. So like this is, the Star Wars open world where you play like going into the gangster underworld. Like there's a lot on this that attracted me right away. And so I think of all the games that are coming out this year next to like an Indiana Jones, I'm like, this is something that I definitely want to check out. And so, yeah, I put in about 10 hours. So I will get into my notes, but I want to kick it off with just kind of your instant impressions based on how much time you put into the game so far. Michael Damiani.
Yeah, so I will say I think like the vibes and atmosphere are really good when it comes to like the environments, especially like indoor environments. When you're going through like the seedy underbelly of these like dangerous, factions and doing your smuggling and your shady underworld dealings, it they nailed it. Like I think that part of it is fantastic. And I do think that the gameplay from what I played has a lot of potential. The things that I am like looking more to you to be sold on is like the open world nature. Like if that really has like good, strong selling points, because from what I've played, sticking to the missions, making those decisions about who I'm going to support, I'm definitely feeling that pull. And it is, I really like the character of K-Vest so far. And I really like the characters I'm interacting with. And as I said, I really like the atmosphere. Maybe one too many vents. There's a lot of like going through vents in this game. And I'm like, another vent. But
there's other than man, that area is completely restricted. I'll use this vent right here.
This is a vent. And I love, we'll get into it, but I also love using Nyx. Like I thought it might be a little bit too complicated, but like immediately this clicked. It was like, oh, this is so good and so essential and just works so well.
Nyx is really great. Yeah, I think one of my favorite things that is like I have a whole paragraph in my notes about it. It's just like the vibes are dead on. Like even just going through the cities, there's just a lot of conversations, a lot of people walking around, a lot of speeders. I like leaving a city and you see these big speeders going in or ships going in and landing on platforms, and like best cantinas in any Star Wars game I've ever played. Like just very fun vibes you get. You were talking about the factions, and I'll touch on that briefly, but you get just random factions missions, nothing super story heavy. It's just like go pick up this thing from one person and drop it off, and it's always some guy who's just leaning back, like in a chair, like I got jobs for you. So I love that vibe. Just the Han Solo like gun at the hip walking into a cantina. Just that never gets old because I've unlocked, I don't know how many are total in the game, but I've unlocked 4 different planets that I can go to, and they all have different vibes. They all have like multiple cantinas, different interiors. You play Sabak, which is the game from the Lando from the Han Solo movie. It's how he got the Falcon, and so I'm finally learning like, okay, I'm sure there's lots of Star Wars nerds that know how to play different versions of Sabak. Fun to like go into like exclusive Sabak rooms. Like, oh, I like snuck my way up here. Like I have enough rep to go into here and play Sabak with these guys. So yeah, all of that is really great. And I like that a lot of the eras are represented. So they some of the locations are like in the sequel trilogy, actually. The sequel trilogy gets a lot of love.
Yep, where you start.
But there's still some prequel, like, remnants, like ships and droids and stuff kind of lingering around. And of course, because it takes place between Empire and Return, just this is like the height of Imperial rule. And it's fun to they don't really talk about a lot of the other stuff that's going on between Empire and, and Return specifically, but you definitely get a sense, I am living in that era. if you are a Star Wars fan, this is great. Like this is just like drenched in a lot of the stuff that I really like from Star Wars. One thing that I just did at the end that it's funny that like last night I was like, all right, I'm done with gameplay, and then today I'm like, I'll play for like another half an hour, and there's like a like Yakuza style like eating mini game you can do.
Oh.
There's like a little robot serving food, and I could like sit down and do like a little. It was pretty silly. Like I do like a little mini game where I'm like pressing buttons, and like Nix and I are fighting over like a little food dish, and then I unlocked like a little bonus that I could give Nix. But it's just the cozy vibes. Like they definitely and lots of different vibes, not only in the cities but in the biomes. Jungles and deserts and canyons, like farm fields, and vibes I think is the number one thing that I would say about the game. I'm actually, if I'm being honest with you, Damiani, I'm a bit mixed. It's actually interesting that you brought up K, because I'm at this point, about 10 hours in, I'm kind of losing a little motivation in terms of just following the story on its own.
Okay.
Because she kind of gets pulled into everything. There's she's not super attached to the things that are going on, and like the villain is, this is a big rich guy that I would love to take down. I'm super excited to destroy his empire, and like I don't necessarily need a strong pull to go off and do nefarious scoundrel things, but I was surprised that like she doesn't really have a lot of stake in the story beyond just like taking care of a lot of the people that are out to get her, working her way through the underworld, getting rich. Like a lot of those things make sense as motivations for the character. But going back and reviewing footage, because it's tough not to compare this to Jedi Fallen Order and its sequel, which I did not play Survivor, but I played Fallen Order. And like, I was hooked on that story immediately. I was like, I'm very invested in this character. This is extremely dramatic. I'm excited to figure out what, learn more about this person's past. And while I think Kay's personality is fun, there's a lot of times where Kay's like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And it's just like that little beat over like a lot of missions, kind of gets old, and I was just surprised like that I was not super invested in her and in her plight in the story.
All right, that's interesting to hear, because I think like they did an okay job with the setup there. I mean, you have her introduction and kind of like the tutorial planet area, and then you do your first like few missions, and then she's treated like a newcomer. Like when you first get to the second planet and you start meeting the factions, you have someone who you can kind of take you under their wing, and it's like, here's how you play the game. Like if you want to like get into this stuff, and so she kind of like fumbles the ball quite a bit. She's just like, even early on, they're like, she doesn't know what she's doing. I was hoping it would go somewhere with this, but it sounds like this may be a little bit more about like the storylines with other characters and what's going on with like the different factions, and you're just caught up in the middle of it, and you really maybe there isn't so much like character development, I guess, so much as it's just character progression as you're getting through like the game, it sounds like.
Yeah, and that might develop later. Again, there's like a lot of threads that they introduced early on that like that haven't paid off later. I feel super distant with the villain. Like every now and then you kind of check in with him, and he's like, I'm mad, and it's like, I just don't care about this guy. And like I said, Kay is just very, in a playful way, in a very fun Han Solo Lando. Like, I don't know how this thing works. We don't have a plan. What are we doing? And so I was just kind of waiting for her to. I don't know, I guess just do something different. But I will say that there were definitely some surprises in the story. There were definitely some narrative twists and turns that I was not expecting. Some things where I think they kind of pointed that the story was going in one direction and then very quickly, changed course.
Okay.
And so there were some satisfying points there. And my favorite thing about, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, I think the most fun thing that feels different from a lot of open world action games, and certainly different from a lot of Star Wars games I've played, is the reputation system.
Yes.
Which is just very interesting. It's something you can't avoid, and it's just kind of something that's always lingering there, whether you're doing side missions or you're doing main story stuff or you're walking around the world. And basically how it functions is pretty simple. Kind of reminds me of like Mercenaries back in the day, where like, the more missions you do for one faction, the more likely you are to piss off the other factions.
Yeah.
And then there's a tier, so it can go from terrible, bad, poor, good, and excellent. And you kind of start in poor.
Yep.
And basically what that means is you won't have a lot of opportunities with that faction, and their district in town, in each of these towns, they'll shoot on sight.
Yeah.
And so there are some just very practical missions that I had where it was like, oh, go into this area and grab this thing and leave. And it's like, well, if they liked me, that would be super easy to do. The Elder Scrolls games had this a lot too. Like I remember going into zones and being like, oh, I can actually just walk in there because I'm totally cool with them. But it really just fits that scoundrel lifestyle. And what's great is that, and this really helps, gives the narrative some juice, is a lot of times, decisions will pop up right at the last minute. So somebody will say, like, go in and get this artifact and get out of there. And I'll get the artifact. And then just right at the last second, somebody will say over the comms, like, if we just take this, we can sell it to the Crimsons and we're good. Or we'll get money from that, but we'll piss off the Pikes. And it's like, well, I just finally... that sounds really great, but I just finally got in their good graces. So for that reason, I'm not going to do this. Or somebody will come in and be like, I'm going to kill you if you don't give me this information. Like there's a lot of really interesting, tough decisions and some of it you don't really know how it's going to work out until you make that decision and try, to finish the mission that way. But I found it wasn't just as, because a lot of times reputation systems don't really matter that much. You can kind of play to your preferences, but they're not really going to stop you from doing something. And I found every time one of those popped up, I was always thinking about it. Or if I had a little bit of free time before I went to bed, I was like, well, let me just do one mission because, man, the Pikes have hated me for so long. And 10 hours in, I have 2 factions that hate my guts, man. I can't, like, it's not a super easy thing to do, and it's just always popping up.
Yeah, I like that. I like how the very first time it's presented to you, it's that it makes you believe that you're not going to be able to be on the good side of everybody. You are going to have to be on the bad side. You're going to have to, of some factions or groups, you have to make the decisions. But like they said, knowing when to flip sides at key moments could also be, it was part of the game. So knowing when, reading the room and deciding like, well, maybe it would be better to do this. And I kind of like that. I like the possibility. I don't know if it'll deliver it by the end because obviously we haven't finished the game, but I would really like it if there's no way to like min-max or you can like get great reputation with everyone. Right. At least on your first playthrough, it's just not possible. I would really love it. I know Hubert would love something like that. He loves it when you can't just like please everybody and that like your decisions will matter because as you'll say, it carries weight. Your decisions carry weight. And so I'm very curious. I don't know how much we'll be able to like glean from our discussion about how much variance there is in your experience depending on what you pick. For example, the very beginning, I think this is a little bit more obvious, but the first tutorial thing is acquiring credits. You need 100 credits to continue a mission, and you can just walk around town picking up random stuff and sell them and get 100 credits that way. But there's also an NPC you can bump into who tells you there's a data pad nearby where you can use it to get inside info on a race, like horse or whatever they're called, racing, horse equivalent of horse racing there, and bet on the winner because it will tell you that, and I'll just like instant give you like basically the credits you need. Wow. And like I
totally missed this.
I did that. And then I was like, well, and then Kay said, well, when we took the money from the person who said, place a bet for me as well, Kay's like, well, I'm sorry to like lie to you, but I need this credits. But I placed the bet and I won. So I was like, let's go back and repay them. They were just gone. I'm like, huh. So is there like, I'm curious, like how where the like, the smoke and mirrors, and like you can see through all of that, and it's like, oh, it's only the illusion of choice up to a certain point for some of these things. So I'm very curious, like how different of an experience you can have, or if it's really just be like, in this planet, I just can't access the city to do my basic missions. They all hate me here, so I have to like sneak through their portion of the town. Or if you're on a good terms with them, it's like, oh, it's easy because I don't know what you picked for your first choice. I'll ask you that. Did you give the important intel to Gorak, or did you give it to the Crimson Dawn? Because I feel like that was
Dawn. I went with that.
Okay, yeah. I did too, because I felt like that was the payoff for that. Felt like it was narratively more rewarding because it tied back to the beginning of the game. I was like, oh, they talked about your mentor. They talked about, I think this is what I was supposed to, but like I don't know how that's going to be going forward, how like different it's going to be for each person and their decisions. Yeah,
they're vendors that open up that you can buy some stuff to and sell some stuff to from each area. And just like I said, like there's in each town they have their own districts, and they have their districts on the open world map. And so it was just super convenient to be like, oh, I can fast travel there because they like me. Nice, because that thing is right next to that story mission that I'm going to do. And I like the smuggler vibe of like, right when I move up from poor into good. And so it's like, okay, now you can finally go into their district and they won't like shoot you, but you still walk by those guys with big guns going into the district. And it's a little tense, and so I think that really makes sense in the story that they're trying to tell with Kay and in that world. And so I was just constantly reminded, always going back to that page and seeing, like, where am I with rep? Who should I focus on right now? I could see myself again. I just put 10 hours. I definitely want to focus on the story to unlock some of the later stuff. But if I had just, a ton of free time, I would I could see myself getting really obsessed with just that rep system. And like I said, trying to make everybody happy. But at the same time, you can also kind of just pick one, be like the Huts, screw the Huts, and just like constantly be working against them and really like drive that rep down. And no Empire rep, so screw the Empire.
Oh,
you don't have to worry about the Empire. You can get wanted and have to deal with that, and maybe like pay a fine. So they're not chasing you around. But it's like there's no way to get the Empire in your good graces.
Of course, that'd be too OP. So the rep system's pretty important, but like decision making also extends into the gameplay in terms of how you approach your objectives in your missions. Early on, they teach you about like stealth mechanics, but like also when it's time to go guns blazing, how to actually like fight with your blaster and how to do like melee combat. So how much you've played so far, how are you feeling about like that balance? And what kind of style are you using? Are you generally using your stealth and those abilities that you can unlock as you meet requirements, or are you kind of like how are you playing it?
I'm trying to do stealth as much as I can. I actually found that the shootouts are like okay, kind of feels like Battlefront. It's like a little loosey goosey. Yeah. It feels, just in the way that Battlefront's like very quick. It's not like a full like a Twitch shooter, but the cover system's like kind of automatic. There's no way to really like lock on into cover, and so I'm getting more used to it. What I like is there are heavier guns that you can pick up, but you can only use them for a little bit. And so it's fun to like shoot a guy, have him drop it, and then be behind cover, be like, Nix, go get the gun, And so Nix will run over and like grab an assault rifle for me, and like, okay, that helps. But I'm not totally in love. Stuff can be kind of bullet spongy. Like I'll headshot a stormtrooper 4 or 5 times. It's like, come on. So it's tough to kind of know, like how long I should spend on one target. And again, that's just like, comparing to a lot of other like current action games that I've been playing like this gen. But it's totally serviceable, and I just really like the stealth stuff with Nix. I just think he really, works well in that, distracting things, moving cameras. I like that you get one shot that slowly recharges, but you get one shot to just knock somebody out if you don't want to make a lot of noise. And so it's kind of fun to like send Nix at one guy, stealth shoot another guy, run up, you knock somebody else out, then go deal with the guy that Nix was distracting. And so it's fun that stuff isn't so easy in terms of like an Assassin's Creed, like gold knife attack where you just like, take out 4 people automatically. You do have to time it well. And just to me, it really fits that world of her very stealthily kind of sneaking into a place that's really dangerous. And there's some missions where they're like, you have to shoot your way out of this. Like the alarm just went off. And but there was one where I had to go into an Imperial base and just like walking right past a bunch of stormtroopers is fun. It really fits the world. And so I like stealthing, and just for resources, because you have blasters, you just have to worry about overheating. You don't have to worry about ammo.
That's nice.
It's just nice to not have to just cough up all the Bacta shots that I need to get health back.
And how do you feel about like the environments, about like the pathing, like the different options you had? Did you feel like it was like good variety? Do you feel it was a little too straightforward, in terms of like how to like make it through a mission?
There were like a couple times I got stuck, but it was a lot of like mechanic. There was like one time I couldn't figure out how to get past like vents, and then realize like on the other side of the vents I had to shoot a thing. So I thought the environments were great. There's one mission that was really fun where I went into like an old ship from the High Republic. Ooh. So it was kind of cool going through like a derelict ship, and you could kind of get a sense of like the interior, like, oh yeah, it feels like an old Republic ship, but it's like the tech is just like a little outdated. So there's some fun. It doesn't quite reach the platforming prowess of like I said, the Jedi Fallen Order series. I think really has some bonkers, just crazy fun platforming when you get all your abilities humming. Like it's very just kind of simple Lara Crofty, climbing, and you get a grappling hook that you can use later. And so yeah, that stuff wasn't very complex, but and we can kind of get into talking about the open world. I think that functions really well. I really like going into Imperial areas, and like it kind of feels like the Obi-Wan Disney Plus series, where like he's trying to really go underground, and there's just like big Imperial transport vehicles, lots of Imperial checkpoints that he's got to deal with. And so it's fun when you really piss the Empire off and they come like chasing after you, or just sneaking into places, taking out Imperial guards, stormtroopers, and stuff. So yeah, like I said, I got stuck a little bit, but there's just a lot of hacking you can do. The hacking, they have a couple hacking systems that one is like very timing based.
Yeah, it's like a rhythm thing.
And one is kind of like picking the right icons to like unlock passwords, and those weren't really like tough. So I was curious if there's going to be like a lot of strategy there, or like in a cyberpunk way, if that was going to be something like I had to really level up to get into places.
Yeah,
it didn't seem that tough.
It seems like it's just there for like kind of like fun, and there's options you can implement on both of them to make, if like you're just struggling, you basically can like go all the way to, I think, auto complete them if you really just don't want to like deal with them. But like one of them, you can change it from like the unfamiliar symbols that are of the whatever language they're in there to like Roman numerals. It's like, you could have just like numbers if you're struggling with that, or a visual guide for the rhythm one where like will flash on the panel you're supposed to look at, not just like the light flashes on the side. So it's like, that's kind of like nice. So they and it speaks to their some good options for tweaking difficulty, accessibility. They had it was pretty comprehensive. I felt like
health and damage and all that. You can set it to story, or you can set it to hard. I actually just noticed that right at the end, because I'm for my tastes, you're like a little close to K. I really feel like it feels like a little cramped. Like I'd love to just kind of breathe and just kind of push out into the environment a little bit. And you can change your view. You can push out a little bit, but just not in terms of where she is in the frame. Yeah, I liked those options. I love that in Sabak you can change it from like a cool little Star Wars font to just like the number 5. It's like because I'll kind of squint a little bit. Like, is that a 2 or a 5? Oh, okay.
So did the open world feel like, typical Ubisoft feel, or do you think like they, I know there was like some concerns with that, that it might be like that type of style, and then like, do you feel like the faction stuff came into play in like the open world stuff, like going to different bases or anything that weren't necessarily Imperial? Did you come across anything like that, or maybe like an NPC who showed up out in the open world? I'm curious how those two things, how it felt in terms of open world. Like, was it too much checklist stuff, and was the reputation system impacting in any meaningful way?
It feels much more like an action game set in an open world than your traditional, Ubisoft, which I love. I love me some Ghost Recon. I love Assassin's Creed. Those definitely feel much broader and bigger.
Okay.
Like I talk to a lot of people, especially when they play Assassin's Creed, they'll go into a new area and just be like, oh god, just so many things open up. And this seems much more organic in terms of like discovering things. There's a lot of kind of like the way Spider-Man 2 was set up, where it's like you will just discover outposts and discover things along the way somewhere. So it was nice doing a mission, going somewhere, and then on the road, I'd be like, "Oh, treasure, okay, base, okay, like let me finish this quest, and then I'll go back and do those things." Fast travel points are not super close to each other, so like the bike is pretty fast. The bike takes a lot of damage, so like I was a little nervous when I first started playing, like going over cliffs and stuff. But like, you can kind of blast over stuff and move, pretty quickly. There's a little bit of open world kind of puzzle where it's like, to get to this area I have to go through this tunnel, but other than that it's pretty wide open.
Okay.
And it varies pretty well. Like one planet you go to is like mostly just this big city. One jungle planet that I went to later on, is a lot less open and more kind of roads. So like it's not, didn't really open up into wide open fields like the first planet. And then the most wide open is you unlock Tatooine later, which is just desert. It's just really big wide open spaces. When a faction isn't happy with you, it's kind of tough to get through areas because like the roads are so small that if I bump into like some pirates or I bump into somebody that hates me, whereas like when I was on Tatooine, it's like, I can just go wherever and it's not that big of a deal. So yeah, I definitely thought there was a lot of variety. Like we were talking about, just really really good vibes, a lot of attitude in the interiors in the cities, but also in these districts when you go in there and they don't like you compared to when they do.
I got a little bit of the taste of the speeder bike combat, like where you were mentioning you can run into enemies, but like the very first time you get on it, you're in a chase sequence, and you can kind of just run away, but like it tries to prompt you to use. Actually, you can use it off on foot as well, like that adrenaline focus mechanic where you can target up to 3 people and like just go boo, 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 like
you just do a quick like Red Dead Deadeye pow
exactly,
pow pow, just 3
exactly.
targets, yeah.
So how did you really rely on that a lot, or I mean, how did you feel it was like well handled, executed?
It's the same thing. We should mention the ship as well. It's the same thing when the ship when you get into space. I don't recall ever like blowing up. I think one time I really pushed it and took on like way too many targets, but like I slammed into things and flew off my bike plenty of times, but I never got like killed on my bike. So that was never, so like there were times where like, oh no, I'm going to see if I can like slam this guy into a wall or like build up enough, of that, that build up that meter so I could use that Deadeye. But that never really slowed me down. That was never really like an issue out in the open world. It's just a lot easier to like stop someplace, get under cover, and then take care of people and then get back on your bike. And the bike is super easy. You just right on the D-pad and and it'll
handling was pretty good. There's no like insane parts like like Shadows of the Empire speeder bike level or anything, nothing like that,
fast. Yeah, you slam into
no
a wall.
Crazy sequences like that. Okay, that's good.
And you upgrade that. You upgrade your ship, and space combat's pretty cool. All the environments in orbit outside of the planets are all very different. One of the places that I unlocked later on had a space station in orbit that I like landed on the space station, and that had its own interior, its own cantina, and so I think that's the one thing that I definitely want to say, because I do have like some issues with the story and some issues with comparing to other open world games. There's a lot in here. I'm 10 hours in. I could see this easily go into 30 or 40 hours to just explore everything, and like I said, the exploration's very organic. It was very fun to just like, I'm just going to focus on treasures right now and just zoom around and see. It's like, oh, okay, I need to upgrade my pistol to get into there. Okay, I'll clock that and do that later. Your journal, which lays out all of your quests and stuff, is extremely detailed. So it's really easy if you're like, this is what I specifically want to do right now. You can go into your journal and find, it's like, okay, I'll spend a lot of time doing this, or this is just a very easy rep thing that I can do, or this is just like a treasure point where I just got to figure out how to get in there. So yeah, I was able to fill the time when I was playing this game with activities very easily because the journal is pretty robust. Yeah, I like the organic feel of like taking off, even though it's just like, oh, I'm in the clouds, now I'm in space, and like same thing when you're landing.
Yeah,
I wouldn't say I got like as attached to the ship as I did in Jedi Fallen Order, but because you just have that crew and like the cockpit's so cool with being able to see everywhere when you're flying around. But it is fun, upgrading your pistol and your speeder bike and your ship are like the main things that you upgrade. Good vibes on the ship. There just wasn't, compared to what is the space game, the Star Wars that was just exclusively all the ship stuff?
The Star Wars?
Squadrons,
yeah.
It obviously is not as extensive, and the environments aren't as big as they were in that game. But it's a smart. I was curious actually when I heard a Star Wars open world game. I was like, oh, it'd be interesting if we're just stuck on a planet. I wonder if they're going to do space stuff. So I like that there's space stuff in the game. It feels like it belongs here. It's neat to go to these different orbits and explore all those areas. But there's enough to do on the planet. It's kind of a thing later on. There were definitely moments where I was like, I'll do this quest. And it's like, where is it? Oh, it's in space. Like, I got to get in my ship and fly out there.
Yeah, there you go.
Go get that cargo, bring it back. And I want to talk about Nyx for a second because there's like Nyx Cam where you hold L1 and Nyx can like steal from people. Nyx can go into places and open doors for you. And Nyx can distract people. And he's just a cute little bugger and like never really gets in the way. There were like some glitchy parts where he would like walk through people or like
I had some stuff like that.
I could tell he wasn't standing on something, like on a ledge, but and as he just because it felt a little samey, especially coming. I know I've brought up Fallen Order so many times, but like coming from this other Star Wars action game where I had a little friend that followed me, like I think the droid in Fallen Order. I think there was a lot of like utility as far as like the action was concerned, like healing and getting buffs and stuff. And this is definitely much more environmental exploration. And there's just a great distract things. So like when
Yes.
stormtroopers be coming around the corner, all you got to do is just tap L1 and he'll run up and attack them, and then you can get like a good melee hit in. This has nothing to do with Nyx, but one of my favorite smuggler abilities that I unlocked was when you first get caught. When like, oh no, somebody saw me for like a second, you can be like, hey,
Yeah,
what?
the fast talking. Yeah, I like that. That's so
I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm looking for the bathroom. Like so
Yeah.
it's neat to just get like a quick second before you
and
can
you
like,
can
go in and do
improve
something.
that too, which is hilarious. It's
And that
pretty good.
seems very very Star Wars, very smuggler, very scoundrel type of an ability. Kind of reminds me of Star Wars Galaxies. You could do a lot of that stuff, like lying to people and
Nice.
and the abilities are NPC focused, which is interesting. Like you meet somebody, and then that person opens up a skill tree, almost kind of like they're teaching you how to do these things. And so you meet a bartender very early on, like right at the beginning of the story, and so like that's where you unlock all of these different abilities to kind of be sneaky and do like cheeky scoundrel stuff. And I'm like hunting for the fourth of those, and I think there's 4 more after that. So there's a lot of fun abilities that you unlock, and each ability has just like a have Nyx do this once, and do this weird activity, and then once you finish those.
Yeah, I like that progression path, like stuff like that.
Which is again another example of like at any given moment when you're trying to figure out what to do, it's like, oh, let me focus on that. Like a lot of the times, just because I was hustling through the story, I would be like, oh, I got an ability. What is this? Oh, but you could totally just focus on the abilities and just try to like get all that done. The thumbstick R3 is like your activate stuff button, which is a little weird.
So it was weird. It took a second to get used to, but like it actually worked fine for me. I thought I was gonna hate it, but yeah, it was a little weird for you.
Well, just in an open world game, it's weird to like have the right thumbstick click. It's just every time I want to like sit down, talk to a person, pick something up. I was like, what a weird button. And I went in and you can't really change, the button configuration. And so I was like, oh, that's a little odd. But then I got used to it. It was like on the top of my list of like, that's really strange. The game also defaults to widescreen, which I turned off right away.
Oh, I'm very interested. I did too. I'm very interested to hear Huber because he's a big fan of the Black Bar, like the Evil Within.
The Order 1886, man, creator's intent.
He loves stuff like that. So I bet he does not disable that whatsoever.
Right. Yeah. And so apologize. There might be some purists out there who are like, no, man, it's like the movie. It's the same aspect ratio as the cutscenes. But I was just like, can I? I would like to see more.
Yeah.
Especially because, like I said, you're really close onto her. I think one of the other things I'll say that I was not a huge fan of is the character models are kind of hit or miss. The cutscenes, like, there are just some weird, just real specific detail on the faces.
Yeah, a few times I experienced that.
I only bring this up because after playing something like Horizon Forbidden West, like the characters look so good in that game, and of course, like it's something like an Uncharted, that you come into this game, it's like, oh, okay, like set your expectations just like a little lower. Like, I'll go up and talk to an NPC like in town, and they're very much like, hello, like there's just not a little organic movement when you're like coming in and out of conversations. But that's just completely me comparing it to other, things in the genre that I think just do it better, but not necessarily something that was slowing me down and in the best parts of the game, not something that I think really stood out that much. Yeah, there's just lots to do. I really hustled through because I wanted to get into space. I wanted to go explore these other environments. But now I really have a lot of freedom. There's this big heist at the end of the game that the K is planning for. And so I have to go. I got to get the gang back together. Got to go and recruit all of these different people. And so I'm sure those personalities are going to be fun. They're going to have a lot of corresponding abilities that I'm going to learn. They're going to have their own stories. And certainly those vibes are going to be different depending on the different planets that I go to. And so I appreciate that, to not only just have one big map, but have 4 with their corresponding orbits. And then that's all that I've unlocked so far. I'm juggling 4 different factions. There might be a 5th. I don't know. But lots to do at this point in the game. So, and I appreciate you spending a little bit of time with it so we could chat about it, Damiani.
Yeah.
And
pleasure.
Yeah. And I don't know if I'll make a podcast appearance for this one, but I'm certainly going to chat with Mr. Michael Huber.
Oh, yeah.
Because he was the first name that I thought of when I reached out to Bloodworth, and Blood was like, oh, we might be able to bring you in on some Star Wars Outlaws coverage. So it's just like riding a bike, playing Star Wars games, and doing coverage for Easy Allies. Thank you for the chat, Damiani. Thank you for watching, everybody. Take care.